Joyce, your presentation this morning, the pros, family life pros and cons, you got right into it with your leading statements by addressing yourself to the question of our marriage and family on the way out. And I wonder if you could kind of capsule for us a little bit your conclusions and your answers.
Well, I don't believe that they are at all. There's never been a culture that wasn't a dead-end culture that didn't have some form of marriage, whether they called it pair bonding or what have you, and an arrangement to take care of helpless children until they can get on their own. So I think that marriage will be our form of closest relationship in the future. It may take a slightly different form. For example, I think that the cluster living is most likely to occur, where you have individual families, nuclear families, living in a community around a center of interest, whether it's a university, whether it might even be a sports area, a golf course or tennis courts, but they would share a common interest or common work, and the children would visit back and forth, taking some of the pressure off the family. For example, if a teenager couldn't get along with his folks, he might go and live with another family for a week or two and then come back feeling refreshed and the folks feeling a little bit better too, and some of the quarreling calmed down, and the children would visit back and forth a little bit more easily. I don't think that the commune will be our form of the future.
Why don't you think so?
It takes a very special kind of individual to put up with communal living. Most of the communes that have fallen by the wayside have fallen because of the ordinary tasks of everyday life. Who's going to take out the garbage, and who's going to do the dishes, and who's going to do the cooking? It isn't the sexual problem that is the major one. And it seems to produce children who are a little bit, they relate to their peers and not to older people, and are a little bit cooler in affect, a little bit less emotional, or a little colder than we feel is desirable. So I think that the nuclear family will continue.
Courtship is certainly, though, in a period of transition. Would you agree to that, Joyce?
Yes, very much so. There are more people living together before marriage than ever before, but there's still some of the basic factors which remain. For example, the trial marriage is not a real test of marriage at all. Any more than before the astronauts went up in space. They tested weightlessness here on Earth, but it wasn't the same until they got up in space and really experienced it. And so the point of marriage is a total commitment. I love you, I want to spend my life with you, I hold nothing back, all the cards on the table, nothing withheld. And until you have that total commitment, you don't have a marriage. It isn't just sex, and it isn't just living together, and it isn't putting your pots and pans together. It is this, I'm holding nothing back. And until you've got it, you don't have a marriage.
Do you have any statistics, Joyce, on how many of these couples who are living together eventually marry?
There have been a few studies, nothing very extensive, and what they find is this: if they compare couples who are going together and planning to get married and couples who are living together and hold the sex factor constant, both having as much sex and as satisfying a sex, they find that in terms of probability, it is much more likely for the girl who is going with a man to end up married to that man than it is for the girl who's living with the man. Apparently, we still have some of the old-fashioned, and you might call it respect, you might call it any word you want, but there's still a little feeling, a little reservation on the part of the man about the girl who moves in with him that the man who is going with the girl doesn't have. And so the gal who moves in is likely to get on a kind of a merry-go-round, living with this man, and then living with the next man, and living with another man. Eventually she does marry, but in terms of probability, less likely to marry that man.
Joyce, what advice do you give to parents who have a son or a daughter who is living with a partner, not married, of course, because it is a big hang-up and a terribly traumatic thing for many parents? What would be your advice to them?
Well, I think that we set our young people's ability to make reasonable judgments about their life, not when they're grown up, but when they're very little. And if we allow our children an opportunity to make decisions and see how these decisions work out, and we guide them into making the proper decisions, then when they're adult, at least adult enough to live together, we hope that we have trained them in the way of making the decisions that are right for them. We can't make all of our children's mistakes. They've got to make some of them themselves. So one feels you've done the best parenting you can, and then the rest of it is in the youngsters' hands.
But would you advise them to just go ahead and admit to their friends that their children are doing this, or just refuse to discuss it, or what?
Well, I don't think that refusing to discuss anything solves any problem at all. If the young person feels that they've made their life and they're going to live it, but that the parents are open to, that the door is open, that they can come back if they come a cropper or they have problems, or at least they can turn to their folks for advice and for comfort, and sometimes comfort is necessary. At least that's the best that can be done on the part of the parents. It doesn't mean the parent has to say, okay, great, terrific, I'm going to, that's best for you. Because after all, the parent has an obligation to say what he or she believes. But beyond the advice, you can't force anybody to do what you want them to do.
Joyce, thank you very much for sharing this time with us today here at Port St. Lucie, Florida.
Thank you, Bobbie. It's always such a pleasure to talk with you.